Emma Walker sat in her tiny apartment, still wearing her scrubs from a 12-hour night shift at the hospital. The smell of antiseptic clung to her, and her feet ached, but when her phone buzzed with a desperate message from her best friend, she couldn't ignore it. "Please, Emma, I can't go on this blind date. Could you go for me, just this once? He thinks I'm a nurse too, just keep it casual." Emma laughed softly at the absurdity. A blind date? For her friend? She had never even been on a proper date herself, always too busy working double shifts to pay off student loans and help cover her mother's medical bills. Her heart tugged with reluctance, but she also couldn't bring herself to say no. That was Emma, always putting others first, even when she had nothing left to give. She stared at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror, tying her hair into a simple bun. No fancy dress, no makeup beyond a little lip balm, just the same person who comforted crying patients and held strangers' hands in their worst moments. "What's the worst that could happen?" she whispered. Maybe he'd see through her immediately, maybe he'd laugh at her simple clothes, maybe he'd walk away. But something in her heart nudged her forward, a quiet courage born from years of resilience. She didn't know then that the blind date she reluctantly agreed to would lead her into a story far bigger than herself, one filled with surprise, kindness, and a love she had long stopped believing she deserved. The cafe was warm, golden lights flickering against polished wooden tables as Emma stepped inside, clutching her worn purse. She instantly felt out of place among the well-dressed couples laughing over cappuccinos, but she straightened her shoulders and reminded herself she was only doing a favor. At a corner table sat a man who seemed to carry both authority and solitude in his posture. Dark suit, neatly pressed shirt, yet his eyes, deep and tired, spoke of sleepless nights that had nothing to do with business. He stood when he saw her, a gesture so rare these days that Emma's cheeks warmed. "You must be Claire," he said, his voice low but kind. Emma froze for a heartbeat, guilt tugging at her chest. Should she tell him the truth? That she wasn't Claire, just the poor nurse filling in for her friend? Before she could decide, he smiled gently, as if her presence itself was already enough. They sat down, and conversation trickled awkwardly at first, but soon flowed like a river unblocked. He asked about her life, her work, her dreams, not the shallow questions she expected, but ones that made her feel seen. For reasons she couldn't explain, she answered honestly, speaking about the challenges of nursing, the long hours, the patients who left imprints on her soul. He listened intently, as though every word mattered. And when he spoke of being a single father, raising a little girl who had lost her mother too soon, Emma saw the loneliness hidden beneath his polished exterior. Their eyes met, and in that fragile moment, it no longer felt like a blind date gone wrong. It felt like two weary souls stumbling upon each other in a world that often forgot how to be gentle. As the minutes turned into hours, Emma forgot entirely that she was supposed to be someone else. She laughed more freely than she had in years, surprised by how natural it felt. The man, Daniel, he finally introduced himself, shared stories about his daughter, Lily, a curious 5-year-old who loved fairy tales and insisted her dad read the same bedtime story every night. Emma's heart softened at the way his eyes lit up whenever he mentioned her. She realized that behind the polished exterior of a CEO was simply a father doing his best. And when he asked about Emma's own life, she didn't hide the truth. She spoke of her late father, her mother's illness, the crushing weight of bills that never seemed to end. Instead of pity, Daniel's expression carried respect, as though he admired her strength. Still, Emma's conscience twisted. Claire had sent her here pretending this was her date. Was it fair to keep sitting across from him, letting him believe she was someone she wasn't? She finally opened her mouth to confess, but Daniel's phone buzzed, and he quickly excused himself to check a message. Emma sat there, wringing her hands, wondering if honesty would end whatever fragile connection had formed between them. Just then, he returned, his face softened by something she didn't expect. "That was Lily," he said with a small smile. "She wants to know if I met someone kind today." His words struck Emma deep in her chest. She wasn't glamorous, not wealthy, not the person Claire was supposed to be. But for the first time in a long while, she wondered if maybe being kind was enough. The evening wound down, but neither of them seemed eager to leave. Daniel insisted on walking Emma home, despite her polite protests. The chilly night air nipped at their cheeks as they strolled through quiet streets, their footsteps falling into a gentle rhythm. For the first time, Emma allowed herself to study him more closely, not the sharp suit or the aura of success, but the man behind it all. His shoulders carried invisible weight, the kind that comes from loving deeply and losing painfully. At her apartment door, she hesitated. This was the moment to tell the truth, to explain she wasn't Claire, that this meeting had been a mistake. She took a breath, but before words could form, Daniel looked at her with a softness that made them vanish. "Emma," he said quietly, surprising her. "I know you're not Claire. I knew it the moment you started talking." Her heart stopped. Fear rushed in. Had she humiliated herself, wasted his time? But Daniel continued, "I don't care who was supposed to be here tonight. I care that you were." His voice carried no judgment, only gratitude. Emma's eyes burned with unshed tears, the honesty and acceptance undoing her carefully built walls. She realized he had seen her all along, the tired nurse, the struggling daughter, the woman who kept going despite everything. And instead of turning away, he had chosen to stay. For a man who had every reason to guard his heart, that was the greatest kindness she could have imagined. In that quiet doorway, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in years, the possibility of belonging, of being chosen not for who she pretended to be, but for who she truly was. Days turned into weeks, and what began as an accidental meeting blossomed into something neither of them had expected. Daniel invited Emma to dinner again, this time with Lily. Nervous, Emma brought along a small picture book from the hospital gift shop, worried she wouldn't know how to connect with a child. But the moment Lily climbed into her lap and begged her to read, Emma felt her heart melt. The little girl giggled at her silly voices, clapping her tiny hands, and Daniel watched quietly, his expression softening with every laugh. Emma realized then that this wasn't about filling some empty role, it was about building something real. Still, doubts gnawed at her. She was just a nurse, living paycheck to paycheck, with no grand future to offer. Daniel was a CEO, surrounded by wealth and influence. Their worlds couldn't be further apart. One night, unable to hold it in, Emma confessed, "Daniel, I'm afraid I'll never fit into your life. I don't belong in that world." He reached across the table, gently taking her hand. "Emma," he said firmly, "the world I live in is empty without people like you in it. You don't need to fit into my life. You've already made it better." His words left her breathless, because she felt the truth in them. For the first time, she allowed herself to believe that love wasn't about status or perfection, but about the courage to see and be seen. And maybe, just maybe, she had found someone willing to walk beside her through all of life's storms, not because she was extraordinary, but because she was simply herself. Months later, Emma found herself standing in Daniel's backyard, sunlight spilling across the grass as Lily tugged at her hand, begging her to push the swing higher. Laughter filled the air, and Emma marveled at how quickly her life had shifted from lonely shifts in sterile hospital hallways to this, a place where love and belonging felt possible again. Daniel approached with 2 mugs of tea, setting one gently in her hands. "You've changed everything," he whispered, his eyes steady and sincere. Emma shook her head, smiling softly. "I haven't done anything except be myself." He touched her cheek, his voice firm but tender. "And that's exactly why I fell for you." In that moment, all her doubts, all the nights she wondered if she was enough, dissolved like mist in the morning sun. She realized love wasn't about riches or appearances, it was about kindness, resilience, and showing up even when the world felt heavy. Emma, the poor nurse who once thought she had nothing to offer, had given the most valuable gift of all, herself. Daniel had offered the same in return, not as a wealthy CEO, but as a man who wanted to share his heart and his daughter's laughter with her. Together, they had built something strong and unshakable, not born from convenience or pretense, but from truth. And as Emma pushed Lily's swing higher, listening to her joyful squeals, she whispered a quiet prayer of gratitude. Sometimes, the greatest blessings come when we least expect them, when we say yes to something small, and discover a love that changes everything.